Before I share this story, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if someone has ever stolen your thunder at every important moment of your life, I need you to hit that like button right now. And if by the end of this story you feel the satisfaction of watching karma finally catch up to a narcissist, please share it. Because what happened to me after 20 years of abuse will give hope to everyone still trapped in their nightmare. This is how I went from being worth nothing to discovering I was worth $5.7 million, and how my narcissistic sibling lost everything in the most public way possible. My name is Aspen, and for 20 years, I lived as a ghost in my own life. I grew up in Carrollton, Texas, a sprawling suburb where perfect families displayed their perfect lives behind perfect white fences. From the outside, the Chin family looked like another American success story. My parents, immigrants who'd built a thriving restaurant chain from nothing, had 2 children who excelled at everything. Except only one of us was allowed to shine. My older sibling Morgan was 3 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, they were the sun around which our family orbited. Morgan could do no wrong as the golden child, while I, the scapegoat, could do no good. But it wasn't just that Morgan was favored, it was that they systematically, deliberately, maliciously stole every single moment that should have been mine. Let me paint you a picture of what attention theft looked like in the Chin household. When I was 7, I won my first piano competition. I'd practiced for months, my small fingers stumbling over Chopin until they finally danced. The morning of my recital at the Carrollton Center for the Arts, Morgan suddenly developed a mysterious illness. My parents spent the entire event in the lobby on the phone with Morgan's doctor. When my name was called for first place, I looked out at the audience to see 2 empty seats where my parents should have been. When I was 12, I was selected for the National Honor Society, the youngest student in my school's history. The induction ceremony was scheduled for a Thursday evening. That afternoon, Morgan accidentally broke their wrist doing a skateboard trick they'd never attempted before. Guess where my parents were during my induction? The emergency room, comforting Morgan through what turned out to be a minor sprain they'd exaggerated into a fracture. My validation seeking began as a survival mechanism. I craved belonging, acceptance, and connection. When those needs weren't met consistently, my brain adapted to seek them in whatever way possible. I became the kid who overachieved, hoping that if I just accomplished enough, my parents would finally see me. I volunteered for everything, stayed late to help teachers, got straight A's, joined every club, all while watching Morgan take credit for my achievements or overshadow them with manufactured crises. The pattern was so consistent it became predictable. Science fair? Morgan would have a panic attack that required both parents' attention. School play where I had the lead role? Morgan would pick that exact night to come out as questioning their sexuality, a brave moment that of course required all family focus. My high school graduation? Morgan chose that morning to announce they were dropping out of college to find themselves, turning my milestone into a family crisis management session. But the cruelest part wasn't just the stolen moments. It was the gaslighting that came after. Morgan would tell false stories about me to other family members, share personal, intimate details about my life that I'd asked to be held in confidence. It was all about gossip and drama. They'd twist every situation to make me look ungrateful, selfish, or attention-seeking. Aspen's so dramatic, Morgan would tell our aunts and uncles at family gatherings. They're always trying to make everything about them. Like, we get it, you play piano. Do you have to brag about it constantly? I never bragged. I barely mentioned my accomplishments because I knew they'd either be dismissed or stolen. But Morgan's narrative became the family truth. I was labeled the difficult one, the attention seeker, the jealous sibling who couldn't handle Morgan's success. Our parents enabled this dynamic completely. My mother used her manipulative tactics to create divisions among the family so she could maintain control. She pitted my father and sibling against me. Whenever something went wrong, it was my fault. My father, exhausted from running the restaurants, took the path of least resistance, which meant siding with whoever was loudest, and that was always Morgan. The theft continued into my teenage years with increasingly devastating consequences. My first relationship ended when Morgan convinced my girlfriend that I was cheating on her, a complete fabrication supported by doctored text messages Morgan had created. My college applications were accidentally deleted from our shared computer the night before they were due, forcing me to resubmit everything late. My acceptance letter to Rice University mysteriously vanished, and I only found out I'd been accepted when the school called asking why I hadn't responded. When a child grows up not feeling valued or receiving praise or encouragement, they may have trouble regulating their emotions. By the time I turned 18, I was a mess of anxiety, depression, and desperate validation seeking. I'd learned to make myself small, to celebrate my achievements in secret, to expect that anything good in my life would be taken away or tainted by Morgan's interference. I remember the day I realized this wasn't normal. I was in my dorm room at UT Austin. I'd ended up there after the Rice University fiasco, talking to my roommate Sarah about our families. She was describing her brother's reaction to her getting into college, how he'd driven 5 hours to surprise her with a congratulations dinner. "Wait," she said, looking at me with concern. "Your sibling did what on your graduation day?" As I retold the story, watching her expression shift from confusion to horror, something clicked. This wasn't typical sibling rivalry. This was abuse. Systematic, deliberate, psychological abuse that had been normalized and enabled by my entire family structure. But even with this realization, I felt trapped. I was forced to accept that my parents would not protect me from my abusive sibling. Regularly experiencing Morgan's abuse created tolerance of abuse in adult relationships, a belief that relationships were one-sided and that others would not protect me from abuse. I became an excessively guarded individual who was fearful of vulnerability. The financial control was another cage. My parents paid for college but held it over my head like a sword. Any complaint about Morgan, any boundary I tried to set, was met with threats to cut off tuition. I learned to survive by becoming invisible, by seeking validation from professors, friends, anyone outside the family who might see my worth. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that while I was scrambling for crumbs of recognition, I was quietly building something that would change everything. Every late night studying, every connection I made, every skill I developed while trying to prove my worth, it was all adding up to something extraordinary. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to understand the full extent of what was stolen from me, and the secret weapon I didn't even know I was developing. While Morgan was busy stealing my spotlight, I was unknowingly building an empire in the shadows. It started junior year of college. Desperate for validation and needing money that didn't come with family strings attached, I took a part-time job at a tech startup in Austin called Digital Dynamics. It was supposed to be simple data entry, 15 hours a week, just enough to give me some independence. But when you've spent your entire life overachieving for scraps of recognition, good enough isn't in your vocabulary. I revolutionized their filing system in my first month. Created an algorithm that reduced data processing time by 60% in my second. By month 3, the CEO, James Liu, was personally mentoring me. Unlike my family, James saw my potential clearly. "You have a gift, Aspen," he told me during one of our sessions. "The way you see patterns, solve problems, it's exceptional. Have you ever considered pursuing this professionally?" Through working with James, who happened to have a background in psychology, I learned techniques similar to cognitive behavioral therapy. He helped me identify and challenge negative thought patterns while gradually building self-reliance. I began to recognize that my worth wasn't dependent on my family's opinions. What started as a part-time job became my sanctuary. I threw myself into coding, into building, into creating. While Morgan performed their dramatic scenarios at family dinners, I was quietly writing software that would eventually be valued at millions. My external support network wasn't just emotional, it was professional, financial, and growing stronger every day. James introduced me to other entrepreneurs, tech innovators, venture capitalists. I attended conferences using money I earned myself, built connections Morgan knew nothing about. I was creating a parallel life, one where I wasn't the family scapegoat but a rising star in Austin's tech scene. The beautiful irony? Morgan's constant need for attention actually provided me with the perfect cover. They were so focused on maintaining their position as the family's center of attention, they never noticed I was coming home later, traveling for conferences, building something substantial. My parents, eternally distracted by Morgan's latest crisis, didn't question why I was suddenly less desperate for their approval. I developed 3 separate apps during my college years. One for mental health support that connected people with therapists, born from my own desperate need for help. Another for data visualization that several major companies licensed. The third, the one that would change everything, was a platform for detecting and preventing financial fraud using AI pattern recognition. That third app caught the attention of Ethereum Ventures, a cryptocurrency investment firm. They didn't just want to buy it, they wanted me to lead their new security division. The initial offer included a $500,000 signing bonus, a salary that would make my parents' restaurant empire look quaint, and something even more valuable, stock options in their parent company. I'll never forget sitting in their Austin office, looking at the contract. The number at the bottom, my potential net worth if their projections were correct, was $5.7 million within 5 years. We'll need an answer by Monday, the CEO told me. It was Thursday. That weekend was my college graduation. I knew what would happen if I told my family about the job offer. Morgan would either sabotage it somehow or find a way to claim credit for my success. My parents would want to control how I spent the money, probably insisting I invest in the family restaurants or, worse, support Morgan's latest artistic endeavor. So I made a choice that would define the next chapter of my life. I told no one. I accepted the position secretly, deferring my start date by 6 months to travel and find myself, a story my family readily accepted since it sounded like something Morgan would do. In reality, I was setting up my new life, apartment hunting in San Francisco, establishing financial accounts my family couldn't access, and most importantly, working with a therapist who specialized in narcissistic family dynamics. Dr. Rodriguez was the first person to use the term narcissistic abuse to describe my family's situation. She introduced me to concepts from online support communities, including the Narcissistic Family Dynamics subreddit where thousands of people shared similar experiences. Through our sessions, I learned about gray rocking, boundaries, and the importance of financial independence. Your family has programmed you to seek their validation, Dr. Rodriguez explained. But what happens when you realize their validation is worthless? When the people whose approval you're seeking are incapable of giving it in any meaningful way? It was like she'd flipped a switch in my brain. All those years of desperate achievement, of hoping this time would be different, it had been pointless. I'd been completely unaware of the narcissistic agenda of my parents and Morgan, that I was just a pawn in a game. For me, everything had been a matter of the heart. For them, everything was a matter of their narcissistic image. Meanwhile, Morgan's life was taking an interesting turn. Without me there as the perpetual scapegoat, they were struggling. Their art career, funded entirely by our parents, was going nowhere. Their social media presence, which they'd built on stories of their difficult sibling, me, was losing engagement. The family dynamics were shifting without their favorite punching bag present. I watched from afar, through cousins' social media and occasional family texts I couldn't avoid. Morgan was escalating, becoming more dramatic, more demanding. They'd started claiming they had various mental health conditions, all self-diagnosed, all requiring immediate family attention and financial support. Our parents were beginning to look tired in photos, the strain of managing Morgan without a scapegoat to deflect onto starting to show. During those 6 months of finding myself, I was actually in intensive therapy, building my confidence, and preparing for the confrontation I knew would eventually come. I was also watching my cryptocurrency investments grow, my app's success exceed projections, and my net worth climb toward that magical $5.7 million number faster than anyone had anticipated. Learning to recognize when I was seeking validation from external sources was the first step. By acknowledging this behavior, I could choose a more effective option, breaking the cycle and learning to look internally for validation. I stopped posting on social media entirely, stopped sharing achievements with family, stopped seeking approval from anyone who'd proven they couldn't give it authentically. But the universe has a sense of humor. Just as I was learning to live without external validation, I was about to receive the ultimate validation in the most public way possible. And Morgan, in their infinite narcissistic wisdom, was about to hand me the perfect opportunity for revenge on a silver platter. The breaking point was coming, and it would happen at the one event Morgan couldn't steal, their own wedding. Morgan's wedding was set to be the social event of Carrollton's year. They'd found the perfect partner, Alex, heir to an oil fortune, someone whose family connections and wealth made them the ultimate trophy spouse. The wedding was Morgan's masterpiece of attention-seeking, a $300,000 affair at the prestigious Adolphus Hotel in downtown Dallas, with 400 guests, featured in Southern Bride magazine, and documented by a team of photographers and videographers. I'd been back from my finding myself journey for 3 months, quietly working remotely for Ethereum Ventures while maintaining the fiction that I was unemployed and living off savings. My family's disdain for my failure to launch was palpable at every interaction. Morgan, of course, used every opportunity to highlight the contrast between us. Poor Aspen, they'd say at family gatherings, voice dripping with false concern. It must be so hard watching everyone else succeed while you're still finding your way. But don't worry, not everyone can be exceptional. I'd perfected my gray rock technique by then. Gray rocking meant being boring and unemotional like a gray rock, giving them nothing to feed on. But inside, I was counting down to something I'd been planning for months. The wedding day arrived like a storm everyone could see coming but no one could stop. October 15, 2025, a date that would live in Chin family infamy. I arrived at the venue early, wearing the deliberately understated outfit Morgan had insisted on. We wouldn't want you to distract from the wedding party, would we? And took my assigned seat in the 5th row, behind distant relatives and family friends. The ceremony was peak Morgan, dramatic, excessive, and somehow still making them look like a victim. They'd written vows that spent more time talking about their difficult journey and overcoming family challenges, coded references to me, than about their love for Alex. I sat through it all, stone-faced, waiting. The reception was where things got interesting. Morgan had planned a series of speeches, all carefully orchestrated to paint them as the family hero. Our father spoke about Morgan's strength, our mother about their creativity, family friends about their generosity. Each speech was a knife, cutting away at the truth of who Morgan really was. Then came the moment that changed everything. Morgan stood up for their own speech, because of course they would speak at their own wedding. They were 3 champagnes in, glowing with attention and triumph. The room fell silent as they tapped the microphone. I want to thank everyone for being here, Morgan began, their voice carrying that familiar note of false humility. Especially my family, who've supported me through everything. It hasn't always been easy. Some of you know we've had our challenges. They paused, eyes finding me in the crowd. My sibling Aspen is here today, and I want to publicly say that despite our differences, I'm glad they could make it. I know it must be hard, watching your older sibling achieve so much when you're still struggling to find your place in the world. The room shifted uncomfortably. Even for Morgan, this was bold. Several guests looked at me with pity. I saw my Aunt Helen mouth "oh no" to her husband. Morgan continued, emboldened by the attention. But that's what family is about, isn't it? Supporting each other through success and failure. And Aspen, when you finally do figure out your life, we'll all be here for you. Maybe you could even come work for Alex's family business. I'm sure we could find something suitable for your limited skills. The laughter that followed was nervous, uncomfortable. But Morgan wasn't done. They'd decided to really twist the knife. Actually, let's give Aspen a round of applause for being here today. It takes courage to show up when you have nothing to celebrate yourself. Come on up here, Aspen. Let everyone see you. It was a power play, designed to humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered in our social circle. Morgan wanted me to either refuse and look petty, or comply and stand there while they towered over me in their wedding finery, the successful sibling graciously acknowledging the failure. I stood up. The room held its breath as I walked to the microphone. Morgan's smile was triumphant, already savoring their victory. They stepped aside, gesturing magnanimously for me to speak, clearly expecting me to mumble congratulations and slink away. I looked out at the sea of faces, family, friends, business associates, the entire social ecosystem that had enabled Morgan's abuse for 2 decades. Then I pulled out my phone. "Thank you, Morgan, for this opportunity," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I actually do have something to share with everyone. You see, Morgan's right that I've been finding myself. What they don't know is what I found." I connected my phone to the venue's AV system, a feature I'd confirmed was available during my earlier reconnaissance. The massive screens around the ballroom, meant to display romantic photos of the couple, flickered to life. 6 months ago, I continued, as the first slide appeared showing my Ethereum Ventures contract, I was offered a position as head of security development for one of the largest cryptocurrency firms in the world. The murmur that went through the crowd was like electricity. Morgan's face had gone pale. "My signing bonus alone was $500,000, I continued, as documentation flashed on the screens. "But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that my equity in the company, as of yesterday's market close, is worth approximately $5.7 million. The room exploded. Gasps, exclamations, and more than a few "oh my god"s filled the air. But I wasn't done. I'd prepared for this moment with the precision of someone who'd spent 20 years having their thunder stolen. "But money isn't everything, is it, Morgan?" I said, turning to face my sibling whose mouth was opening and closing like a fish. "So let me share something more meaningful. For the past year, I've been documenting our family dynamics with the help of my therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, and a legal team." The screens changed to show excerpts from my therapy notes, legally obtained recordings of Morgan's verbal abuse, screenshots of messages where they'd taken credit for my achievements, and a particularly damning video from last Christmas where Morgan had bragged to cousins about how easy it was to manipulate our parents into ignoring me. Every missed recital, every stolen moment, every lie told to make me look unstable, it's all here. 20 years of systematic emotional abuse, enabled by our parents and witnessed by many of you in this room. The silence was deafening. Alex had moved away from Morgan, their face a mask of shock. Our parents sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. Morgan's carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time, in front of everyone who mattered to them. "But here's the best part," I said, allowing myself a small smile. 3 months ago, I started a foundation for survivors of narcissistic family abuse. I pledged $2 million of my own money to fund therapy, legal support, and safe housing for people escaping situations like mine. We've already helped 47 families. I clicked to the next slide showing the foundation's website and testimonials from survivors. The Chen Foundation for Family Abuse Survivors. I named it after our family, Morgan, because I wanted something good to come from all that pain. The coup de grace was the final slide, a legal document. "This is a cease and desist order," I explained, as Morgan's legs seemed to give out and they sank into a chair. "If you or our parents attempt to contact me, harass me, or spread false information about me, you'll face legal action. My lawyers have already documented enough evidence for a civil suit worth millions in damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress." I turned back to the audience, many of whom were recording on their phones. I'd anticipated this, in fact, I'd counted on it. To everyone here who's ever enabled this abuse by staying silent, who's ever dismissed my pain as sibling rivalry, who's ever told me to be the bigger person, you're complicit. Every single one of you who watched a child be systematically destroyed and did nothing because it was awkward or uncomfortable to speak up. I looked directly at our parents. "Mom, Dad, you failed me. You chose the easy path of appeasing Morgan instead of protecting both your children. Morgan's a narcissist because you made them one, and I'm in therapy because you let them destroy me. This is on you." Finally, I faced Morgan one last time. Their wedding makeup was running with tears, but I felt no pity. They'd cried many times before, always strategically, always to manipulate. "Morgan, you stole 20 years from me. 20 years of moments, achievements, and joy. But while you were so busy taking credit for everything I did, you never learned to actually do anything yourself. You're 30 years old, unemployed, living off our parents, and your entire identity is built on being better than me. Well, congratulations on your wedding. It's the last thing you'll ever steal from me. I walked toward the exit, then paused at the door for one final statement. Oh, and that viral video of the speech? It's already at 2 million views on TikTok. The hashtag narcissistic sibling exposed is trending. Your wedding is famous, Morgan, just not how you planned. The last thing I heard as the doors closed behind me was Alex's voice. I want a divorce. What the wedding guests didn't know was that my dramatic revelation had been 6 months in the making. Every word, every slide, every moment had been carefully orchestrated with the precision of a military operation. The revenge I'd executed wasn't born from a moment of anger, it was a calculated campaign designed to finally balance the scales of justice. It started with Dr. Rodriguez, my therapist, who'd initially been horrified when I'd shared my plan. Aspen, revenge fantasies are normal for abuse survivors, she'd said carefully during our session in April. But acting on them rarely brings the closure you're seeking. This isn't a fantasy, I'd replied, pulling out a binder I'd compiled. This is justice. And I need your help to do it right. The binder contained everything, 20 years of documentation I'd secretly gathered. Report cards Morgan had destroyed. Photos from events they'd ruined. A timeline of every major achievement they'd stolen or overshadowed. But most importantly, it contained my strategy for exposure. Retaliation is a way for narcissists to inflict tangible damage on the victim, whether it involves an assault on their privacy, their good name, their work, their future relationships or friendships. The narcissist seeks revenge to punish you and re-establish control over you. I knew Morgan would retaliate after any confrontation, so I had to make the first strike count and protect myself legally. Dr. Rodriguez, seeing my determination and the extent of the documentation, eventually agreed to help, within ethical bounds. She couldn't provide therapy notes without proper authorization, but she could verify patterns of abuse if legally required. More importantly, she connected me with Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a forensic psychologist who specialized in narcissistic family systems. Dr. Hoffman reviewed my documentation with the eye of an expert witness. This is one of the most comprehensive cases of sibling narcissistic abuse I've seen, she told me. The pattern is undeniable. But you need legal protection before you proceed. Enter Marcus Thompson, a Houston-based attorney who specialized in family trauma cases. I'd found him through the Chin Foundation, though it didn't exist yet. I'd been researching lawyers for eventual foundation work. Marcus had won several high-profile cases involving narcissistic abuse and understood both the legal and psychological complexities. Texas law recognizes intentional infliction of emotional distress, Marcus explained during our first meeting. With this documentation, we could certainly file a civil suit. But that's not what you want, is it? No, I admitted. I don't want their money. I want the truth exposed. I want protection from retaliation. And I want to ensure they can never do this to anyone else. Marcus smiled. Then we're going to need a more creative approach. The legal strategy was multi-layered. First, we established a timeline showing clear patterns of abuse. Every incident was corroborated with evidence, photos, messages, witness statements from family friends who'd seen things but never spoken up. We identified 146 separate incidents over 20 years where Morgan had deliberately sabotaged or stolen significant moments. Next, we prepared protective orders. Not restraining orders, those required immediate physical threat, but cease and desist documentation that would trigger legal consequences if Morgan or my parents attempted to retaliate. We also prepared defamation protection, anticipating that Morgan would try to destroy my reputation once exposed. The financial protection was crucial. I moved all my assets into trusts and LLCs that couldn't be touched by family litigation. The Chin Foundation was established as a legitimate 501(c)(3) nonprofit, making my donation both tax-deductible and legally protected from family claims. But the masterstroke was the media strategy. I hired Sarah Kim, a digital strategist who specialized in viral campaigns for social justice causes. Sarah had orchestrated several high-profile exposures of corporate abuse and understood how to leverage social media for maximum impact. Your story has all the elements of viral content, Sarah explained. David versus Goliath, family drama, a wedding setting, and a triumphant ending. But we need to control the narrative. We created accounts across all platforms months in advance, building a following with content about narcissistic abuse recovery. No one knew it was me. The accounts were branded as educational resources. We partnered with established influencers in the mental health space, seeding the groundwork for when the story would break. The wedding speech was filmed by 3 professional videographers I'd hired, disguised as wedding guests. We needed multiple angles, clear audio, and backup recordings in case Morgan tried to claim the footage was edited. Every word I spoke was scripted, reviewed by lawyers, and fact-checked. Nothing actionable, nothing that could be considered slander, just documented truth. Taking a social media break had been crucial for my mental health, eliminating the comparison to others and the anxiety about how my posts were being received. But now, social media would be my weapon. We even prepared for contingencies. If security tried to remove me, we had a backup plan to stream live. If the AV system failed, I had portable speakers. If Morgan became violent, we had witnesses ready to intervene and document. Every possible scenario was gamed out and prepared for. The foundation wasn't just for show. I'd been working with Dr. Rodriguez and other therapists to create a real support system for abuse survivors. We'd already soft-launched, helping families quietly while building our infrastructure. The wedding announcement would bring attention and donations that would help hundreds of people. 2 weeks before the wedding, I did a final review with my team. Marcus confirmed all legal protections were in place. Sarah showed me the social media strategy, posts ready to go live across platforms the moment I began speaking. Dr. Hoffman had prepared a professional statement about narcissistic abuse that would be released to media outlets. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Rodriguez asked during our final session before the wedding. "Once you do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family will be permanently severed." "It already is," I replied. "They severed it the first time they chose Morgan's lies over my truth. I'm just making it official. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified." The night before the wedding, I didn't sleep. I ran through the speech 100 times, checked and rechecked every piece of technology, reviewed every slide. My hands shook as I got dressed that morning, putting on the understated outfit Morgan had mandated. Walking into that venue, seeing the elaborate decorations, the hundreds of guests, Morgan holding court in their designer dress, for a moment, the old Aspen surfaced. The one who would have stayed quiet, endured the humiliation, been the bigger person. To shield myself from the anguish of rejection, I'd gone to great lengths to seek approval, validation, and acceptance from others. But that Aspen was dead. As I sat through the ceremony, watching Morgan perform their false love story, I thought about everyone who'd messaged the foundation. Stories of siblings who'd stolen inheritances, destroyed careers, ruined relationships. People who'd never gotten justice, never had their day of reckoning. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for all of us. When Morgan called me up during the reception, my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. But as I walked to that microphone, phone in hand, 20 years of rage crystallized into perfect clarity. The revenge wasn't just about exposure. It was about reclamation. Taking back my story, my truth, my power. And it was about to work better than I'd ever imagined. The moment I connected my phone to the AV system, I knew there was no turning back. The screens flickered to life, and 400 pairs of eyes fixed on the evidence of 2 decades of abuse. But what the wedding guests saw was just the tip of the iceberg. The real execution was happening simultaneously across the digital world. As I spoke, Sarah Kim and her team were launching a coordinated social media blitz. The video stream from 3 different angles was going live on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. The hashtags #narcissistic sibling exposed, #chinweddingtruth, and hashtag 20 years of theft were being pushed by 50 micro-influencers we'd partnered with. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. My signing bonus alone was $500,000, I announced, watching Morgan's face transform from smug satisfaction to dawning horror. Behind them, Alex's family, old Dallas oil money with very strict values about scandal, were already reaching for their phones. The documentation on the screens was devastating in its thoroughness. Email threads where Morgan had taken credit for my achievements. Text messages to our parents claiming I was unstable and attention-seeking when I was really just asking for basic recognition. The piece de resistance was a recording from Morgan's bachelor party 2 weeks prior, where they'd drunkenly bragged to friends about how they'd trained our parents to ignore me. Aspen's so fucking easy to manipulate, Morgan's slurred voice echoed through the ballroom speakers. Just create a bigger drama, and boom, parents forget they exist. Been doing it since we were kids. They still think I had cancer in high school. It was just mono, but I milked that shit for months. The collective gasp from the audience was audible. Our mother's hand flew to her mouth. She'd spent 6 months driving Morgan to chemotherapy that was actually just vitamin infusions at a wellness spa. But I kept going, methodical and relentless. Each slide was time-stamped, verified, indisputable. The piano recital they'd sabotaged. The college acceptance letter they'd hidden. The job interview they'd called and impersonated me to cancel. 20 years of calculated cruelty laid bare. Every missed recital, every stolen moment, every lie told to make me look unstable, it's all here, I said, my voice carrying the kind of calm that only comes from absolute certainty. It's common for an abusive narcissist to belittle the accomplishments of those they envy and feel threatened by. They are prone to withholding healthy praise from these individuals and ignoring what they have achieved. They pretend that even the most extraordinary of people are ordinary and mediocre, treating those who have actually surpassed them with contempt. Placing themselves in the position of judging the person that threatens them enables the narcissist to feel a sense of superiority they cannot otherwise obtain. The Chin Foundation announcement was strategic timing. As the wedding guests reeled from the abuse documentation, I pivoted to hope, to action, to something positive built from the ashes of dysfunction. The foundation website crashed 3 times in the first hour from traffic. This is a cease and desist order, I announced, displaying the legal document that Marcus Thompson had crafted. It was airtight, comprehensive, and made clear that any retaliation would result in immediate legal action. Morgan tried to speak then, standing up on shaking legs. You can't, this is my wedding. Yes, I replied calmly. The last event you'll ever steal from me. Although technically, you invited me to speak. There are 400 witnesses to that. Alex's father, Richard Pemberton, stood up abruptly. The Pemberton family had built their fortune on reputation and connections. A scandal of this magnitude was unthinkable. The wedding is over, he announced. Everyone please leave. Now. Wait. Morgan screamed, mascara streaming down their face. This is lies. It's all lies. Aspen's always been jealous of me. Tell them, Mom. Dad. Tell them I'm not. But our parents were silent, frozen in their seats. Because every single piece of evidence I'd shown was real, and they knew it. They'd been willing accomplices for 2 decades, and now everyone knew that too. The venue erupted into chaos. Guests were filming, calling others, posting on social media. The wedding coordinator was frantically trying to stop the live streams, not realizing they were coming from my hired videographers, not guests. Morgan lunged toward me, but Marcus Thompson stepped forward. I'd stationed him strategically near the stage. I wouldn't do that, he said calmly. Assault charges would not help your situation. My situation? Morgan shrieked. You ruined my wedding. You ruined my life. No, I said, pulling up my phone to show the rapidly climbing view count. You ruined your life. I just made sure everyone knew about it. 3.7 million views and climbing. The comment sections were exploding with similar stories, survivors sharing their own experiences with narcissistic siblings. Major media outlets were already picking up the story. Someone had edited clips with dramatic music that was going even more viral than the original. The scene was unfolding at one of Dallas's most prestigious venues, near the Jacksonville Center for the Performing Arts, where our family had attended countless events over the years. The irony wasn't lost on me. Morgan had chosen this venue specifically for its social cash, and now it would forever be associated with their downfall. But the true masterstroke was what happened next. As guests fled the imploding reception, notifications started pinging on phones throughout the room. The Dallas Morning News had just published an investigative piece I'd been working on with journalist Rebecca Martinez for 3 months. The Dark Side of Dallas's Golden Family, a 20-year pattern of abuse in the Chen dynasty. Rebecca had interviewed 17 family friends, former employees of my parents' restaurants, teachers, coaches, people who'd witnessed Morgan's behavior over the years but never spoken up. The article was devastating, particularly the interview with my high school guidance counselor, who revealed that Morgan had tried to sabotage my college applications by calling schools and withdrawing them. "What kind of sibling does that?" she was quoted saying. "I've seen competitive families, but this was pathological." Morgan's phone was exploding with notifications. Their Instagram followers were dropping by the thousands. The art gallery that represented them had already posted a statement distancing themselves. Alex's family lawyer was texting about annulment proceedings. "You planned this," Morgan said, their voice breaking. "You planned all of this." "For 6 months," I confirmed. "Every detail. Every contingency. The same level of obsessive planning you put into stealing my life for 20 years. How does it feel, Morgan? To have your biggest moment turned into your biggest nightmare? To have everyone see who you really are?" Our father finally stood up, his face red with rage. "Aspen, this is enough. You've made your point. Stop this now." "Stop?" I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Like you stopped Morgan from abusing me? Like you stopped them from stealing my childhood?" "No, Dad. This doesn't stop. This is justice." My mother was crying, but not the dramatic sobs Morgan was producing. These were quiet tears of someone whose entire worldview was crumbling. "We just wanted you both to be happy," she whispered. "No," I corrected. "You wanted to avoid conflict. You wanted the easy path. And you sacrificed me to get it. Morgan's a monster because you fed the monster. Every time you chose their dramatics over my achievements, every time you told me to be understanding, you were choosing abuse over protection." Like the Jacksonville police cases that had faced federal lawsuits for excessive force, my family's abuse had finally met consequences. The legal precedent was clear: systematic emotional abuse, especially when documented, could result in significant civil penalties. The wedding videographer, the real one, not my plants, was packing up his equipment, but not before approaching me. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever filmed," he said quietly. "My sister went through something similar." "Thank you." As I walked toward the exit, the room was in complete chaos. Morgan was on the floor, Alex's family was in heated discussion with lawyers on speakerphones, my parents were being confronted by relatives demanding explanations, and hundreds of guests were processing what they'd just witnessed. At the door, I turned back one final time. Morgan had collapsed into a chair, their wedding dress pooling around them like a deflated parachute. They looked up at me with eyes that, for the first time in 20 years, held genuine fear instead of contempt. "The trust fund Grandma left you?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The one you've been living off?" I had forensic accountants review the distributions. "You've been taking money from my portion for 15 years. That's fraud, Morgan. Criminal fraud. Marcus will be in touch about restitution, or we can involve the district attorney. Your choice." The last sound I heard as I left was Alex's voice, cold and clear: "I want an annulment. Tonight." Outside, Sarah Kim was waiting with a tablet showing the social media explosion. 8.2 million views across platforms. National news picking up the story. The Chin Foundation website had received $47,000 in donations in the past hour alone. "How do you feel?" she asked. I looked back at the venue, where my entire past was imploding in real time, then at the tablet showing a future where my story would help millions of abuse survivors. "Free," I said. "For the first time in 20 years, I feel free." The next 72 hours were a hurricane of consequences that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. By the time I woke up the morning after the wedding, #ChinWeddingTruth had become the #1 trending topic globally. The video had been viewed 49 million times across all platforms. News outlets from CNN to the BBC were covering the story. My phone had received over 10,000 messages, which Marcus Thompson was filtering for legal threats versus support. But the real devastation was happening to Morgan. Alex Pemberton had filed for an annulment at 3 a.m., citing fraud. Their lawyers argued that Morgan had misrepresented themselves fundamentally, hiding a pattern of pathological behavior that made informed consent impossible. The prenuptial agreement Alex's family had insisted on contained a fraud clause that meant Morgan would get nothing, not even the wedding gifts. Morgan's social media apocalypse was swift and merciless. Their Instagram, where they'd cultivated an image as an artist and influencer with 80,000 followers, lost 73,000 in 48 hours. The remaining followers were mostly there to watch the train wreck and leave scathing comments. Every old post was being excavated and recontextualized, the charity work that was really photo ops, the original art that turned out to be copied, the inspirational quotes about family that now reeked of hypocrisy. The art gallery that had represented Morgan for 3 years didn't just drop them, they issued a statement revealing that several pieces Morgan had sold as original works were actually painted by ghost artists hired on Fiverr. 3 collectors were demanding refunds totaling $150,000. But the professional destruction was just the beginning. Morgan's friend group, built on their carefully crafted persona, evaporated overnight. Their best friend, Jessica, went on TikTok with her own story. "I always wondered why Morgan's sibling never came to things. Now I know." Morgan told us Aspen was in and out of mental institutions. "We thought we were protecting Morgan from an unstable relative. We were actually enabling an abuser." The video got 5 million views. More people came forward. Morgan's ex-boyfriend revealed that Morgan had faked a pregnancy to keep him from leaving. A college roommate shared how Morgan had stolen her thesis and submitted it as their own. A former business partner exposed how Morgan had emptied their joint account and blamed it on hackers. Narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths can cause long-lasting damage to the lives of their victims. Their emotional and verbal abuse, combined with their cruel, persistent attempts at sabotage, can even drive their victims to self-destruction and suicide. But this time, the narcissist was facing the consequences. My parents' restaurant empire took a massive hit. A Yelp campaign organized by abuse survivors resulted in thousands of one-star reviews. 3 locations had to close within a week due to protests. Former employees came forward with stories of wage theft and hostile work environment. Apparently, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. The Department of Labor opened an investigation. My father tried to call me 47 times in the first day. My mother sent text after text, alternating between rage, bargaining, and pathetic attempts at guilt-tripping. "How could you do this to your family? We gave you everything. Morgan is suicidal because of you. Please, just take it down and we can work this out. You've destroyed us." Each message was forwarded to Marcus Thompson and added to our legal documentation. Morgan's attempts at damage control were pathetic. They posted a rambling Instagram video claiming I was lying, that I'd edited the footage, that this was all jealousy over their success. The comments were brutal. "Success? You're 30, unemployed, and living off mommy and daddy. Gaslighting even now. Classic narcissist. Your sibling has receipts. Where are yours?" They tried to turn it around, claiming they were the real victim, that I was the narcissistic one who couldn't handle their success. Dr. Patricia Hoffman responded with a professional statement that, while not diagnosing anyone specifically, outlined the clear behavioral patterns visible in the documented evidence that aligned with narcissistic personality disorder. Her credibility destroyed any attempt Morgan made to flip the narrative. The Chen Foundation website crashed repeatedly from traffic. We received over $800,000 in donations in the first week. Messages poured in from abuse survivors worldwide. Your courage gave me the strength to finally go no contact with my narcissistic brother. I've been documenting my sister's abuse for years but never knew what to do with it. Now I do. You've shown me that justice is possible. Major celebrities shared the story. A famous actress revealed her own narcissistic sibling experience. A best-selling author offered to write a book about the case. Netflix reached out about a documentary. According to research, rates of narcissism have been increasing, with the rate of increase doubling since 2002. If this research is correct, then many of those narcissists have already had children of their own. The story resonated because narcissistic abuse was an epidemic hiding in plain sight. On day 3, Morgan made their biggest mistake. Desperate and spiraling, they went on a local Dallas morning show that had offered them a platform to tell their side. They thought they could charm their way out of this, use their manipulation tactics on live TV. It was a disaster. The host, clearly prepared, had printed out dozens of the documents I'd released. Every time Morgan tried to lie, she pulled out evidence. When Morgan claimed the piano recital story was exaggerated, she showed the photo of my parents in the hospital waiting room during my performance, timestamped and geotagged. When Morgan insisted the college letter incident was a misunderstanding, she produced the email trail showing they'd deliberately hidden it. Can you explain this? The host asked, showing the bachelor party recording. Morgan froze, then tried to claim it was taken out of context. The host played the full 10-minute recording. Morgan broke down on live television, not with fake tears but with narcissistic rage, screaming that everyone was against them, that this was a conspiracy, that they were being persecuted. I think we've seen enough, the host said, ending the interview early. The clip went viral instantly. #MorganMeltdown trended for days. Alex Pemberton did an exclusive interview with Vanity Fair, revealing more disturbing details about Morgan's behavior during their relationship. The manipulation, the constant lies, the way Morgan had tried to isolate them from family and friends. I thought I was marrying someone who'd overcome family challenges, Alex said. I was actually marrying the challenge. A week after the wedding, Morgan was served with multiple lawsuits. 3 collectors wanted their money back for fraudulent art sales. The wedding venue was suing for damages after several fights broke out during the mass exodus. Alex's family was suing for the cost of the wedding and emotional distress. And Marcus Thompson, on my behalf, had filed for recovery of the stolen trust fund money, approximately $400,000 over 15 years. Morgan's response was to fake a suicide attempt, operative word being fake. They posted a goodbye note on Instagram, then called 911 themselves, making sure to do it during peak social media hours. The problem? They forgot that their location services were on. Users quickly noticed they were posting from a spa, not a hospital. The 4 drip in their hospital photo was analyzed and found to be a vitamin infusion, the same type they'd been getting when they faked cancer in high school. Even their most loyal defenders abandoned them after that. My parents, facing financial ruin and social ostracism, sold their remaining restaurants and moved to a small town in Arizona where no one knew them. Before leaving, my mother sent one last email. I hope you're happy. You got your revenge. You've destroyed your brother and your parents. I hope it was worth losing your family. I forwarded it to Dr. Rodriguez, who helped me craft a response I never sent. I didn't lose my family. I escaped my captors. And yes, it was worth everything. Morgan, with no money, no spouse, no friends, and no prospects, moved back in with our parents in Arizona. The last update I allowed myself to see before blocking all information was a local news story about them being arrested for trying to sell fake paintings at a farmer's market. Meanwhile, the Chen Foundation had helped 312 families in its first month. We'd funded emergency relocations for abuse victims, provided free therapy sessions, and connected survivors with legal resources. The foundation's board included several psychologists, lawyers, and survivors who'd reached out after the wedding video. Studies had found that 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation could physically change the brain, increasing gray matter in areas of the brain related to decision-making, empathy, and emotional regulation. We incorporated mindfulness programs into our foundation's offerings, helping survivors rebuild their sense of self. Dr. Rodriguez and I continued our sessions, now focused on building my life beyond revenge. "You've torn down the old structure," she said. "Now you get to build something new. Something yours." She was right. For 20 years, my identity had been shaped in opposition to Morgan, trying to be seen despite them, achieving in spite of them, existing around them. Now, for the first time, I could just be Aspen. The liberation was overwhelming. 6 months after the wedding, I stood in front of 500 people at the San Francisco Convention Center, delivering the keynote speech at the National Conference on Narcissistic Abuse Recovery. The person who'd once been invisible in their own family was now a beacon for survivors worldwide. "Recovery isn't about forgetting," I told the audience, many of whom were crying. "It's about reclaiming. Reclaiming your story, your truth, your right to exist without apology." My life had transformed in ways I'd never imagined. The $5.7 million net worth I'd revealed at the wedding had grown to $8.3 million thanks to Ethereum's continued success and my AI fraud detection platform being acquired by a major bank. But more importantly, I'd found something money couldn't buy: authentic connection. Showing up authentically led to stronger, more voracious relationships because I could connect with others on a deeper level, offering others that same experience of feeling safe, seen, and accepted. This is what we're all seeking in the world. We all want to feel valued and accepted by ourselves and by others. The Chen Foundation had expanded nationally, with chapters in 12 cities. We'd helped over 3,000 families escape narcissistic abuse situations. The Foundation's YouTube channel, where I shared weekly videos about recovery and healing, had 2.8 million subscribers. Every video's comment section was filled with survivors finding hope and community. But perhaps the most meaningful development was the Sibling Survivors Network we'd launched. There was too little information about narcissistic sibling abuse, and we were changing that. Weekly support groups, both online and in person, gave survivors a space to share their stories without judgment or disbelief. Sarah, a member from our Dallas chapter, shared her breakthrough. "For 30 years, I thought I was crazy. My sister had everyone convinced I was the problem child. Finding this group, seeing Aspen's story, realizing I wasn't alone, it saved my life." The legal precedent set by my case had opened doors for other survivors. 3 major lawsuits against narcissistic family members had been filed citing Chen versus Chen as precedent. Universities were adding narcissistic abuse to their psychology curricula. The American Psychological Association had announced a task force on family narcissistic abuse, with Dr. Patricia Hoffman as chair. My relationship with success had fundamentally changed. Before, every achievement was a desperate plea for validation. Now, success was about impact, about helping others escape the hell I'd survived. When Time magazine featured me in their 100 Most Influential People issue, I felt proud not for the recognition, but for the platform it gave our cause. The irony of Morgan trying to contact me through the foundation was not lost on anyone. They'd submitted a request for financial assistance, claiming to be an abuse survivor. Our screening team, well-trained in identifying narcissistic manipulation, flagged it immediately. They'd also tried joining our online support groups under fake names, but survivors who'd seen the wedding video recognized their writing style and reported them. Their last attempt was a public plea on a podcast that specialized in redemption stories. Morgan claimed to have changed, to have been in therapy, to have realized the error of their ways. They begged for reconciliation, for a chance to apologize. Dr. Rodriguez and I watched the interview together during a session. "Notice the language," she pointed out. "It's all about them. Their pain, their growth, their need for forgiveness. Not once do they acknowledge the specific harm they caused or take real responsibility. She was right. Morgan's apology was textbook narcissistic manipulation, vague admissions wrapped in self-pity, designed to make me look cruel for not responding. I addressed it once, in a foundation video titled "Why No Contact is Self-Care." Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can forgive someone for your own peace while maintaining boundaries that protect your well-being. Anyone who demands access to you in the name of forgiveness is still prioritizing their needs over your safety. That's not change, it's the same pattern in a different costume. The video got 12 million views. The comments were filled with survivors who'd been pressured to reconcile with their abusers and finally felt validated in maintaining their boundaries. You can create a brighter future for yourself, one without toxic people. The effects of this abuse are devastating, but they carry with them opportunities for deeper healing. You'll know you are getting better at setting boundaries when you no longer wait for people to continue their deplorable behavior for the 1000th time. My personal life flourished in the space created by boundaries. I started dating Jamie, a software engineer who'd never heard of the wedding video when we met at a climbing gym. They loved me for who I was, not my story or my money. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, clear communication, and, revolutionary for me, equal celebration of both our achievements. "Your success doesn't diminish mine," Jamie said after I worried about overshadowing their promotion with news of the foundation's latest milestone. "That's what love looks like, celebrating together, not competing." It was the exact opposite of everything I'd learned about relationships growing up. I also found family in unexpected places. Dr. Rodriguez had become more than a therapist, she was a mentor and friend. Sarah Kim and I had developed a sister-like bond through our work together. Marcus Thompson and his husband invited me to their holiday dinners. The foundation team had become my chosen family, united by shared purpose and mutual respect. The book deal I'd initially turned down became impossible to refuse when the publisher agreed to donate all profits to the foundation. Invisible No More, a memoir of surviving narcissistic abuse, hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list its first week. The book tour became a healing journey, meeting survivors in every city who shared their stories and found hope in mine. At a signing in Dallas, a woman approached with tears in her eyes. "My daughter saw your wedding video when she was 15. It gave her the courage to document her brother's abuse. She's 18 now, safe in college, and thriving. You saved her life." These moments made everything worth it. The Ethereum job had evolved too. I'd been promoted to Chief Security Officer, leading a team of 150 people protecting billions in digital assets. My personal experience with manipulation and deception had made me exceptionally good at detecting fraud patterns. We'd prevented over $100 million in attempted thefts using systems I'd designed. "You see what others miss," my CEO told me during my review. "It's like you have a sixth sense for deception." 20 years of surviving Morgan had given me something valuable, the ability to recognize manipulation in all its forms. Addressing excessive validation seeking begins with developing a healthier sense of self and learning to rely on internal sources of affirmation. By understanding the roots of this behavior, you can begin to develop healthier ways of affirming your self-worth and establishing a stable internal foundation. Reclaiming your sense of self is essential for long-term emotional well-being. On the 1-year anniversary of the wedding, I did something that would have been impossible before. I celebrated myself. Not for anyone else's validation, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply because I deserved it. I threw a party for the foundation volunteers, the survivors who'd become friends, the chosen family who'd supported my healing. "A toast," Jamie said, raising their glass. "To Aspen, who turned pain into purpose, silence into strength, and invisibility into inspiration." As everyone cheered, I felt something I'd never experienced in my biological family, being truly seen and valued for exactly who I was. That night, I received an email from a number I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From someone who should have spoken up." It was from my Aunt Helen, my mother's sister. "Aspen. I've wanted to write this for a year but didn't know how. I was at the wedding. I saw everything. But more importantly, I saw everything for 20 years and said nothing. I watched Morgan torment you. I saw your parents enable it. I knew it was wrong, but I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I was a coward. Your courage in exposing the truth has haunted me. You did what I should have done, protected a child who needed help. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I stayed silent. I don't expect forgiveness or a response. I just needed you to know that someone saw your pain all along, and I'm deeply sorry I didn't act. You deserved better from all of us. The foundation you built is extraordinary. I've donated $50,000 and will continue supporting your work. It's the least I can do. You've become the person you were always meant to be, despite us all. Helen. I sat with the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to rage at her. Where was this acknowledgement when I was 7, 12, 15? But a larger part recognized that her admission, her willingness to face her complicity, was part of the ripple effect of truth I'd set in motion. I wrote back. Helen. Thank you for your honesty. While I can't offer absolution for the past, I appreciate your acknowledgement and your support of the foundation. Your donation will help many children currently trapped in situations like mine. If you're genuinely committed to change, consider volunteering with our bystander intervention program. We train adults to recognize and respond to narcissistic abuse in families. Your story, of seeing but not acting, could help others understand the cost of silence. The past can't be changed, but the future is still being written. Aspen. She became one of our most dedicated volunteers, sharing her story of complicity to help other adults recognize their responsibility to protect vulnerable family members. 5 years have passed since the wedding that changed everything. I'm sitting in my office at the Chin Foundation headquarters in San Francisco, looking out at a view I once could never have imagined having. The foundation now operates in all 50 states and 12 countries. We've helped over 100,000 survivors escape narcissistic abuse. The wall behind my desk is covered with photos, not of achievements or awards, but of survivors who've rebuilt their lives. There's Maria, who escaped her narcissistic mother and just graduated medical school. There's David, who documented years of sibling abuse and successfully won custody of his younger siblings. There's the Kim family, who fled narcissistic grandparents and started their own healthy family tradition. My phone buzzes with a news alert. Morgan has been arrested again, this time for an elaborate fraud scheme involving fake charity organizations. They'd been claiming to run a foundation for abuse survivors, a grotesque mirror of what I'd built, and pocketing the donations. The FBI had been investigating for months after suspicious survivors reported the scam to our foundation. I feel nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, not even anger. Morgan is simply a cautionary tale now, a reminder of what happens when narcissism goes unchecked and enabled for too long. My parents still live in Arizona, isolated and bitter. They've made no attempt to contact me since the cease and desist order. Through distant relatives, I hear they still blame me for destroying the family. They've learned nothing. But I've learned everything. I've learned that family isn't about blood, it's about respect, support, and genuine love. My chosen family continues to grow. Jamie and I got married last year in a small ceremony with 20 people who truly matter to us. Dr. Rodriguez officiated. Sarah Kim was my maid of honor. Marcus Thompson walked me down the aisle. There wasn't a single person there who would have enabled abuse or told me to be the bigger person. I've learned that success isn't about external validation, it's about internal peace. My net worth has grown to $15 million, but the real wealth is in the lives we've changed. Every survivor who finds freedom, every child who escapes abuse, every family that breaks the cycle, that's the fortune that matters. I've learned that visibility isn't about being seen by everyone, it's about being seen by the right people. The millions who've watched the wedding video, read the book, or attended my speeches don't define me. The survivor who messages at 3 a.m. saying my story saved their life, that defines me. The latest Chin Foundation initiative is our biggest yet, establishing residential facilities for survivors escaping narcissistic families. These aren't shelters, they're healing centers where people can stay for up to 6 months, receive therapy, job training, and legal support while rebuilding their lives. The first one opens next month in Austin, where my journey to freedom began. We're calling it the Visible House, a place where invisible survivors become visible to themselves. As I prepare for the opening ceremony, I think about 20-year-old me, desperate for validation, accepting crumbs of attention, believing I was worthless. If I could tell that person one thing, it would be this. Your worth was never determined by their recognition. You were always valuable, always worthy, always enough. They couldn't see it because narcissists can't see anything beyond their own reflection. But one day, you'll see yourself clearly, and when you do, you'll realize you were never invisible, you were just surrounded by people who chose not to look. The opening ceremony is sold out. 1,000 survivors, supporters, and mental health professionals will gather to launch this new chapter. Media from around the world will cover it. Morgan will probably watch from whatever device they have access to in federal detention. But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for the 7-year-old winning a piano competition to empty seats. For the 12-year-old inducted into the National Honor Society alone. For the 18-year-old whose graduation was overshadowed by manufactured drama. For every invisible child in a narcissistic family who thinks they're worthless. You're not worthless. You're not invisible. You're not crazy. You're a survivor. And one day, if you choose, you can be a thriver. The phone rings. It's CNN wanting a comment about Morgan's arrest and how it feels to see them finally facing justice. Justice happened 5 years ago, I tell the reporter. When I stopped waiting for them to see my worth and started seeing it myself. Everything since then has just been consequences catching up to choices. I hang up and go back to preparing my speech for tomorrow. The last line is the most important. Today, we open doors, not just to a building, but to possibility. To healing. To the radical idea that every person deserves to be seen, heard, and valued for exactly who they are. Welcome to your visibility. The next morning, standing at the podium in front of the Visible House, I see faces full of hope. Some are crying. Some are smiling for the first time in years. All of them understand what it means to be invisible in your own life. 5 years ago, I stood at another microphone, at my sibling's wedding, and spoke truth into a room full of enablers. That moment went viral not because it was dramatic, though it was, but because it resonated with millions of invisible survivors who'd never seen their reality validated. Today, we're not just validating that reality. We're changing it. The crowd erupts in applause. In the front row, Jamie holds up a sign that says "Visible and Valued." Dr. Rodriguez wipes away tears. Even Marcus Thompson, usually stoic, is emotional. This building, I continue, gesturing to the Visible House behind me, represents everything narcissists fear: truth, accountability, and survivors who refuse to stay silent. It's proof that we can transform our trauma into triumph, our pain into purpose, our invisibility into inspiration. As I speak, I notice someone at the edge of the crowd. An elderly woman with a walker, wearing sunglasses and a hat. Something about her posture seems familiar. She removes her sunglasses, and our eyes meet. It's my grandmother. My mother's mother, who I haven't seen since before the wedding. The one whose trust fund Morgan had stolen from. She nods at me once, an acknowledgement, an apology, a blessing all in one. Then she turns and disappears into the crowd. Later, Marcus tells me she donated $1 million anonymously to the Visible House. The note simply said, "For the grandchild I failed to protect. May this protect others." The story could end here, with triumph and transformation. But real healing isn't a destination, it's a journey. There are still days when the old wounds ache. Still moments when I seek external validation before catching myself. Still times when I wonder what if my family had been different, what if Morgan had been capable of love, what if my parents had protected me. But then I remember, I am not defined by their failures. I am defined by my choices, my growth, my refusal to let their darkness dim my light. 6 months after the Visible House opens, we've helped 200 survivors transition to independent living. The model is being replicated in 10 other cities. The Chin Foundation has become the largest nonprofit dedicated to narcissistic abuse recovery in the world. And Morgan? They were sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for fraud. During the sentencing, they gave a rambling statement blaming me for their crimes, claiming I'd destroyed their life and forced them into desperate measures. The judge's response was swift. The only person responsible for your choices is you. Your sibling exposed your past abuse and chose to build something positive from their pain. You chose to continue your pattern of deception and exploitation. This sentence reflects not just this crime, but a lifetime of refusing to take accountability. My parents didn't attend the sentencing. They'd finally divorced, unable to maintain their toxic dynamic without a scapegoat to blame. My mother moved back to Taiwan. My father remarried within 6 months to someone who reportedly bears an unsettling resemblance to Morgan. The cycle continues for them. But not for me. Today, as I write this final chapter, I'm 9 months pregnant with Jamie's and my first child. We don't know if it's a boy or girl, and we don't care. What we know is this: our child will never be invisible. They'll never have to earn love through achievement. They'll never wonder if they matter. They'll grow up in a home where both parents' accomplishments are celebrated equally. Where emotions are validated, not weaponized. Where love isn't conditional on performance or compliance. Where being seen isn't a privilege but a right. The baby kicks, and I place my hand on my belly. I see you, I whisper. You're already valuable. You're already enough. You're already loved. And that's how we break the cycle. Not with revenge, though that has its place. Not with exposure, though truth deserves sunlight. But with the radical act of seeing our children, really seeing them, and reflecting back their inherent worth. My story went viral because people needed to see a narcissist face consequences. But the real story isn't about Morgan's downfall. It's about rising from invisibility. It's about discovering that your worth was never dependent on their recognition. It's about learning that the family you choose can heal the wounds from the family you were given. It's about becoming visible to yourself. And once you see yourself clearly, your value, your strength, your right to exist without apology, no one can ever make you invisible again.